Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Draft Room. This is the NFL Draft Podcast of the Packernet Podcast Network. So, today, I want to shift our attention to the NFL Combine. That's going to be happening very, very soon, actually. It's kind of crept up on me. I knew it was coming, and it's just, that's how everything goes. I need to be constantly reminded of things that are happening, and usually on the day. This includes like my birthday, Christmas. It's like, holy crap, that's in like 3 days. But with the Combine rapidly approaching, the very beginning is February 22nd, which is 3 days. I want to make sure that we're all up to speed on the pre-Combine information, so that post-Combine we can speak intelligibly about how guys did compared to expectations, blah, blah, blah. Kind of a what to look for kind of a thing. Before we get into that, because I've got a couple different things to touch on with that, probably maybe like a 2-day deal, I don't know. 608-561-3243 is the phone number to call if you'd like to call in. Feel free to drop any mock drafts. I see Beer Cheese Benny just hit me with one. You can text the number, by the way. In fact, I might just, maybe we'll include that as a call as well, because it is hard to call in a mock. I mean, you can do it, but a visual is not the worst thing. So maybe we'll take a quick look at Beer Cheese Benny's mock draft real quick, and then we'll get over to, we got 2 different calls from one caller, but we'll start with that. And then we'll get into the Combine. Thank you guys so much for reaching out. So, Beer Cheese Benny. This is a Green Bay Packers mock draft. He's got defensive tackle Grayson Halton going 52, Igbinosun going 84, Jake Slaughter 120, Pat Coogan, interior guy 158, running back Jamari Taylor at 200, tight end Josh Cuevas at 237, cornerback Thaddeus Dixon at 254, and then Logan Fano, edge rusher, 257. He says, I chose Grayson Halton for the first pick because I feel he is a great pick and the type of player they can't let get drafted by someone else. His ability to find the ball carrier and stop the run while also being able to shed blocks is unbelievable. Would be a good reach. 2 interior offensive linemen back-to-back gives us a center and possibly another guard. Yeah, Grayson has always been intriguing to me. Again, I in my opinion, this is not a very good defensive tackle class unless you're specifically looking for a 235-pound defensive tackle that is a good run defender and nothing else, which a lot of people are interested in that. So in that way, the odds of finding one are not terrible. But if you're looking for anybody that can rush the passer at all, there's almost nobody. Grayson Halton is one of the few, not an elite pass rusher, but he's graded out well as a pass rusher almost every year. 2 of the years that he's been, of the 2 years he started, he graded out 77 and 77 as his pass rush grade. He's had plus above 10% pass rush rate every single year. The sacks are not phenomenal, but that's based on a much higher typical number, 4 and 5 different sacks. Sack rate is not that terrible. But then on top of that, potentially his best asset is his run defense. Now, you still have to ask the question, is this going to translate to the NFL? But if you're looking for a well-rounded defensive tackle, I don't know beyond, let's just say beyond the first round, how many you're going to find in the entire draft class that possess even pass rush ability, much less pass rush and run defense ability outside of Grayson Halton. Igbinosun seems like a solid enough corner. Could argue back and forth about, scheme fit or whatever, but I think his calling card is a guy that can actually play press man, and I don't know that anybody would be opposed to that. Because, again, everybody plays some man and some zone. So anytime you can find a guy that's capable of playing man, that is a huge asset. Now, if you're primarily a zone guy or whatever, and you're looking for specific traits within that, you want to make sure that they can do that. but you got a man guy that's got a reputation for being a really good tackler. I don't know that you can really go wrong with that. Jake Slaughter obviously has a very good reputation. There's the whole interior offensive line or center debate, who's the top guy. Some people do believe it's Slaughter, so getting him in the third round obviously be a massive get. And I said double up on interior guys. Coogan also primarily a center, but has played so 3 years at Notre Dame, 1 at Indiana. His second year at Notre Dame, he did play left guard. So he does have some guard experience. So either way, you feel pretty good about something on your offensive line getting better. So yeah, I think, stylistically, again, I think when most of us do mock drafts, it's more positional than anything. So the going defensive tackle, corner, and then because it's third, we double up to kind of compensate for the fact that we waited until it's third. You kind of maximize the value of we got our number one biggest need with our number one pick. We got our second biggest need with our second pick. And then our third biggest need we doubled up on. Plus we need multiple. So it's kind of the perfect layout for how this would look. And then, down the line, that it kind of doesn't matter as much beyond that because you kind of feel like the value is drying up a little bit, so you do your best. But, grabbing another running back for obvious reasons, we don't know the long-term viability of Josh Jacobs, how many more years we have. Plus, beyond that, it's a big question mark. The tight end after that to possibly be our number 2. Another corner to double up on that position, and then an edge rusher because, we could use the depth. So obviously not going to go all the way through and look at every single prospect just for the sake of time, but I don't know that a lot of Packer fans would be upset with this mock, that's for sure. I mean, people would complain, obviously. Oh, so you're basically not even going to address edge rusher. We don't need a running back. It doesn't matter. You can't win. The only way you win in a mock draft is if you have 7 first-round picks and you make 7 picks for the 7 biggest needs, and then you win. That's the only way to make people happy. Which, by the way, is why I've seen many times people do mock drafts. Well, they'll make like 17 of the most ridiculous trades to either get 1 billion picks or end up with like 3 first-round picks. It's like, okay, dude. Yeah, it nailed it. Good job. Anywho, why don't we get to our call here from Jared, the Uber driver.
What's up, Draft Room? This is Jared, Uber driver from Texas, or trader, whatever you want. So there was something, I don't know if anyone's corrected you yet, specifically in the draft space, but was there a correction on Vanderbilt's quarterback's height for you? Because he's actually closer to 5'10" than 6 foot at all. I don't know if you saw that picture with the other quarterbacks at either Heisman or whatever it was. It might have been just a quarterback award or something, but he was in there and he was the shortest by a lot. I mean, low-key still taller than me, so good for him. But, compared to those guys, I was like, wow, somebody lied about their height. But yeah, just wanted to call in about that. And I might have a second call, but hey, happy to be a new caller on here. Go Pack, go.
So I don't remember what I had said about anything, but I do have him listed at 5'10" here in the draft guide, and I did not put anything down that wasn't official. So this must have been his official measurements at whatever event he was at, Senior Bowl or whatever. 5'10", 198, 9.5-inch hands, and then 29-inch arm length. I don't have the full scouting report on Diego Pavia, but I do have his official height and weight down, which I'm guessing it will again be verified at the combine, assuming he goes there. I still think he's relatively intriguing. I doubt the Packers take a swing at a guy that's this size. I mean, somebody's going to, so it could be them, I guess. But he's there's a lot of guys that I'm intrigued by as sort of backups. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think too many people view him as a starting quarterback, obviously, but I'll give him enough respect to say it's possible. But leaving that aside, he's one of the guys that I'm somewhat intrigued to see what a creative offensive mind could do with him. By the way, check the link in the description if you'd like to subscribe. Again, all heights and weights are officially verified. If it's in there, it's verified. Otherwise, I'm just not putting it in there. Especially with the combine coming up, I'm not going to want to redo everything.
Howdy, this is Jared Taylor, Uber driver
What's up?
from Texas. What's up, draft room? So I used my pre-trial of Gemini to get some draft sleepers and stuff.
Nice.
And then also I did part of it, the research being, people who had a worse 2025 but had a really good 2024. Here's a few of the ones that had the bad year last year, good year the year before. You may have talked about these guys a little bit too. Ryan Williams, wide receiver. T.J. Parker, who's a defensive end. Quen Ewers, QB. Ollie Gordon II, running back. Deion Walker, defensive tackle. And Howard Cross III. Wow, he had a 90 PFF grade, went down to a 71 PFF grade. Wow. There's a few for you. And then national sleepers apparently are Cole Payton, quarterback from NDSU, Terrion Stewart, running back from Virginia Tech, 220 elusive grade. Golly. Nadame Tucker, edge rusher from Western Michigan, Kabichi Nawawu.
Welcome to my world.
Had interior offensive lineman Oklahoma, Red Murdoch. That's a great name. Great run defense grade linebacker from Buffalo. Dalen Bentley, Utah, tight end. And then Grayson Halton, another defensive tackle from Oklahoma. And then the mock draft that they did for us. Let's see how much time I got left. About a minute. Okay. The mock draft that the Gemini did for us is second round, Chris Johnson, cornerback.
Popular pick.
Elite ball skill, 16.1 passer rating against. Number 84, Daryl Jackson Jr. We talked about him. Says run stopper 120. Tristan Lay, offensive tackle, swing tackle depth. Derek Moore at 158, defensive end, rotational rusher. 199, Cole Payton, QB, high upside.
Heck yeah.
254, Dante Balfour, cornerback, special teams, depth corner. And then 257, kicker, 21 out of 22 field goals, Dominic Zbada. Anyways, let me know about all those, I guess. You can stop at each one or whatever. If you have the text up, there you go. That's my question. Go back up.
Yeah, we probably won't go through all those because there's quite a few. I think as far as the mock draft, it's intriguing because it hits on a lot of sort of interesting things that people individually would be okay with, but collectively is like we got a lot of big needs to fill. So if you get kicker and quarterback, you know what I mean? I think a lot of people would be happy, but at the same time, you only have so many picks, and everybody wants you to draft 4 corners and 5 defensive tackles and 7 offensive linemen. But Cole Payton's another guy that is extremely interesting to me as a potential backup quarterback. We're talking Packers here, obviously, or any team if you're looking for the next Malik. Not that Cole Payton is exactly the same, but you know the guys that can get it done with their legs and with their arm. As for the whole thing with players that kind of dipped in their final year, it's kind of weird because I don't know what the general thought process is. It's probably a case-by-case kind of a situation. My thought on when the Packers had a draft, like an entire draft class of those guys, I kind of felt like perhaps it was just value falling. In other words, everyone's got to answer that question of what happened. And you could easily look at it and say, well, that really good year was a fluke year, and that final year kind of proved it. But if you believe in that year that he did really well as sort of an upside, then it's possible that final year really scared some people away and caused them to fall, and the Packers, just maybe above and beyond other teams, feel as though this is an opportunity for draft value to fall. And so that's one way I guess you could look at it. Again, you probably have to look at it as a case-by-case basis. But it is kind of interesting when you see something like that because it kind of sets off some alarm bells or some exciting thoughts that, hey, this guy might actually be kind of a stud, and maybe teams just got scared away because of a down year. I'll keep bringing it up because I really liked his tape, and I like watching the guy, and I think he's really talented, and he was supposed to be like a consensus top 5, if not number 1 overall player, and now he's some cast-off loser that nobody wants, Cade Klubnik. And several quarterbacks are this way. Things kind of went south, and their reputation just kind of plummeted. But, I mean, you look at Klubnik, and, I mean, if he had come out the year prior, everyone would have been ripping each other apart to try to get a piece of him. And, he has a bad year, which has a bunch of issues with the team around him, more so than him. And suddenly it's like, oh, never mind, he's a bum. I mean, maybe, again, Jordan Love was the same way. Jordan Love, what was it, 20, I don't know what year it would have been, 2018 or something was his best year. But, his final year was awful. He had a big breakout year, and then his final, I think, senior year was just absolutely god-awful. And the Packers didn't care. They saw it for what it was, as a lot of other issues went wrong. His entire offensive line was gone. All these different things happened. He's still that guy that we saw 2 years ago. And that's what we want here, and that's what we want to develop. So I think, it's a high-risk, high-reward thing, depending on whether you're getting your evaluation right about why they took a step back. It also can be a good thing because of the whole, breakout age thing. Which actually, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a break? I want to come back and spend a minute talking about the whole breakout age thing for a second, because I've referenced it several times and I haven't really elaborated on it. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so there's no real exact science here because, again, everything is contextual. Sometimes guys deal with injuries. Sometimes guys have bad situations. Sometimes they're used improperly. Whatever the case may be. But there's a couple things to keep in mind here, and I use the term breakout age probably a little too loosely. First of all, breakout age is a real thing. It's mostly seems to be a fantasy football thing, or at least the fantasy football people discovered it, and it's being used in sort of NFL draft evaluation type stuff. It primarily correlates to wide receivers, and then tight ends, and then it kind of goes down a little bit from there. What exactly a breakout is not really super interesting. We can maybe look at specific wide receiver prospects that fit this mold on a different podcast, but let's just say that there is a metric. Some of the things that they found, and again, this is fantasy football type stuff, but hit rates, which would be in the NFL guys that hit 15 plus PPR, points per game using PPR, in at least one of the first 3 NFL seasons. So they're using fantasy football as a metric to find success. But when guys have a breakout age of 19 or earlier, there is a 25% hit rate. That jumps up to 49% if they broke out at 19 years old or earlier and their top 100 picks. So it's nearly 50-50. If they break out 20 or later, there's a 7% chance that they will be one of these hit guys in the NFL. If they're top 100 picks, it's a 22% chance. And then if they never broke out, they don't at any point in college have a breakout age, 2% of these players that are drafted end up being hits in the NFL, 15% of top 100 picks. That's a pretty big deal, right? If you're comparing 2 wide receivers that you like, one of them never had a breakout, like an official statistical breakout. The other one broke out at age 19. You're comparing in a top 100 pick. Let's say, their picks, they're 75 overall. You're looking at a 49% compared to 15%. If you look at it based on year of breakout, which is another kind of big thing as opposed to age, is It's something that I hadn't really considered. I mean, I've alluded to it when I've looked at prospects and I look at PFF grades, and if they start year one and if they're good all the way through, I always highlight that as being a very impressive thing. However, one thing I hadn't considered that apparently is the case is that evaluators, I've always looked at the final year as being the most important. That's the whole point of this discussion. Is it's kind of interesting if you look at 2 years ago. Apparently, the major evaluation that takes place, one of the main evaluations, is not the final 2 years, but the first 2 years. Again, that's not always the case. But if you come into college football and you're 18 years old and you're playing at a really high level, and you do it again at 19, and then you start to dip in production, which we've talked about that a couple times. There's a couple guys that get worse every year. Now, there's obviously, again, context as well as like how bad did you get and why. But it's interesting to think that a guy that got better year over year is potentially less desirable than a guy that got worse year over year because he came into the pros or into college at 18 years old and could dominate against, 24, 23-year-old college players that have been in here for years. If we can just maybe answer for why things got a little bit worse, who cares? Anywho, if you look at by year of breakout, if they do it in year one, they show up in college, year one, they immediately break out, 30% chance of success, 46% if they're a top 100. If they do it in year two, 17% success of success, 38 if they're a top 100. If they do it in year three, 8%, 27% of top 100. Year four, 5%, 14% of top 100. Year five breakout, 0%. That is to say, in their data, for as far back as they've looked, they've never had a guy with a year five breakout, meaning 4 years of suboptimal play, and then year five they had this explosion. Never have they had a guy go on to be successful. And again, remember, hit rate was defined as players averaging 15-plus points per game in at least one of their first 3 NFL seasons. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all bad. I'm sure there's some role players or whatever, but to have 3 full years of evaluation and not one time did you average 15-plus points per game is pretty wild. Couple other points here. Just looking at some breakout age. There's an article here by Dynasty League Football. Again, it's a big fantasy thing, but it's an evaluation thing. There's obviously crossover. Good players put up big points in fantasy, so we're kind of looking for the same thing here. No matter what round it is, breakout age offers a clear way to separate players in terms of their likelihood of success in the NFL. The hit rate of players who broke out at age 18 and 19 are higher than that of players in every round. Since 2001, 73% of all players who have been drafted in the first round with a breakout age of 18 have become top 24 players in PPR scoring. Let me say that again. Since 2001, so we're talking 25 years, if you are a first-round draft pick and you had a breakout age of 18, then you have a 73% chance of that player becoming a top 24 player in PPR scoring. That beats first-round draft capital alone by nearly 14% in terms of hit rate. In other words, you can't just say, well, yeah, obviously first-round picks are going to be better than everybody. Okay, that is 14% better at being predictive than just being a first-round pick by itself. Okay, so that's specifically looking at breakout age. And again, it does skew heavily toward wide receiver, but that's not the only conversation about age. I've talked about this before in the Packernet podcast about age in general. In fact, I think it was Mr. Numberman who kind of pushed me on this one. And I kind of pushed back on it as being intuitive. In other words, it's not necessarily that interesting as a data point, but it turns out that it is. And the question is around older players just not going on to be very good football players. It's not about because they came into the NFL later, they've played less, or that they fall off sooner because they have less NFL years. The fact of the matter is, younger player, if you draft a guy that's 24, 25 years old, the odds of that player ending up being a very good football player are significantly lower than drafting younger players. PhillyCoverCorner.com did an article, are younger draft prospects better players, NFL draft age trends? Couple quotes from that article. Looking at the past 10 drafts, younger players outperform older players in the NFL at every position group. At every position, younger players had better NFL careers than older players. The younger players are the more valuable. 23 and younger players dramatically better than 24 plus, but 22 and younger was even better than 23 and younger. The worst position to draft older were quarterbacks, 36% worse for 24 years old, wide receivers, 29% worse, running backs, 24%, and edge, 17%. 538 did an article called Age Played a Bigger Role in the NFL Draft. It's About Time. It's from back in 2018, because 538, which is actually used to be a very good website for statistical NFL stuff, is now gone. But they just did a very simple thing. They looked at AV, which again is Pro Football Reference's kind of overall value that they ascribe to a player. And they just looked at it and said, okay, age you were drafted, and then average career AV. Now, again, remember, this is average career AV, not total, because, they have less years or anything like that. If you draft a player that is 24 or older, they have a average career AV of 33.6. At age 23, it jumps to 39.5. At age 22, it jumps to 42.9. And if the draft age is 20 to 21, the career average AV is 43.8. So that's a jump of 10 between 24 plus and 20 to 21. 33.6 compared to 43.8. Footballperspective.com did an article, Age and the NFL Draft. They actually put a formula together here. Actual AV equals this plus that times draft age minus 1.4 times age, whatever. But what they wrote in the article is that for every additional year of age, a player's expected AV in the first 5 seasons, and again, that's an important thing to do because you're looking at a shortened, you could say, you have a shortened plan. No. First 5 seasons. So if you're 24 years old, it's 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. That's your first 5 seasons. I mean, we're not talking about you playing at 33. You're still basically in your prime. Even if you're a running back, you're still in your prime. For every additional year of age, a player's expected AV in the first 5 seasons decreases by 1.4 points. So I'm bringing this up because there's kind of two things that are working in unison here, and it's kind of creating a picture. And so when we look at it and say, okay, well, they had a really good 2024, but 2025 took a step back, you can use that positively as opposed to somebody who had a mid 2024 and a really good 2025, because the guy that had a good 2024 was a year younger. Now, maybe we're splitting hairs because if both of these guys really didn't have a very good first 2 years, then it's a minor difference, but it's still a difference. Again, if you look at every year added, the expected AV in the first 5 seasons or whatever decreases by 1.4 points. If we look at it from a draft or a like when did you become a good college football player standpoint, the one guy became a good football player a year earlier than the other guy, even though the other one's more. Plus, the other thing that's stupid about a guy that broke out just in the final season, who's to say he won't regress the next year? He didn't get that next year to even show that he's not going to regress the next year. There's an article here by the fantasy footballers. Fantasy football guys, whether you're into fantasy or not, these guys are numbers freaks and can find some stuff. But they put together a metric called experience-adjusted college production. Simply put, experience-adjusted production is a metric that highlights how productive a player was in a specific year or years in their college careers relative to other prospects. And so, without getting into all the stuff, the point is, if you have a metric that adjusts and gives you sort of a multiplier every year that you go back, and you find correlation to that, in other words, that is a worthwhile metric, essentially what it's saying is that when you evaluate a guy, if you're just like peeking at PFF, and we're looking at 25, 24, 23, and 22, the years, 2025 through 2022 as the 4 years, 2022 gets the heaviest multiplier in terms of how much it matters, then 2023, then 2024, then 2025. So right now I have Red Murdoch up just based on the call that you made. linebacker, elite 2025. He had a good 2024, a good 2023, and he didn't really play in 2022. Now, and again, all of this is debated, all of this is up in the air, all of this is based on context and everything else of the individual player. But I think the biggest takeaway of what if they didn't play, because the one takeaway you could have is, well, if they didn't play, then they weren't good enough, and so that's kind of a red flag. It depends. I think more so you look at the first time that they did start. If they start as a rookie, that's obviously a massive benefit. And if they start as a rookie, like a true freshman, and are very good, that is a very desirable player. But you look at their first years, especially their first years when they actually started, and then look at how they produced. And again, so if I'm looking at 2024, he had a 75 grade, 2025 is a 91 grade. What I used to do, as in 5 minutes ago, is you look at the 2025 grade and say, that is what he is now. That is what he's developed into. And so he's a freak and you should go after him. I think if you were to kind of take the data from the, what is it called? Early career experience, adjusted production, whatever. And I'm not saying you should do this or that this is right, but rather than just taking the 91 grade and saying he's a 91, draft him, you could take it a step further and say, well, we could look at the 3 years that he started and average them. If you did that, you'd have a 78.1. But you could take it even a step further. If you weighted 2023 over 2024 over 2025, and I don't know what you would want to weight it to, but let's just do something small, that would reduce it to, I don't know, a 75 or something. So it changes the overall evaluation where the earlier years matter a lot. Now, it's also worth noting Red Murdoch is 22 years old. So if you're looking at it from a sort of breakout age standpoint, it's also not only just looking at years of playing, but age of playing. He had an elite grade at 22. He had a good grade at 21, and also had a pretty good grade at 20. So again, just bringing this back to the initial discussion of what do you do with somebody that had a good 2024 and a not super good 2025? The first thing you have to do is answer all the questions. What happened? Because that's important. He tore his ACL. Okay, well, that explains the grade going down, but now we have another concern of his ACL. There's a new coaching staff. There's a new group of wide receivers, whatever. Or could the other one have been sort of a fluke? He's a pass rusher, and it was with an elite pass rusher on the other side, and then when that guy got drafted, his production dipped. Okay, well, that's a different calculus. Because now we're saying maybe the 2024 tape was fake. But the point is, if we establish that the 2024 tape is real, but then he dipped in 2025, I think that is a better indication of a good player than a guy that was not super good in 2024 and broke out in 2025. It's just a matter of answering those questions. Alrighty, let's take our final break. I want to come back and look at some of the combine participants. We're gonna the first day. What we're gonna do is find guys that are expected to kind of blow the doors off, just as a fun first combine episode. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right. So before we get started, just so I let you know, everything we talked about in that second segment, I had created an article on Patreon. So hopefully it's a little bit more easy to understand and digest, other than my ramblings, to have it all kind of there for you. Some of the quotes from some of the articles and whatnot are in there. The math largely is in there, and it just kind of lays everything out. Again, we'll probably kind of dig into this, look for prospects that fit these molds, etc., as we go forward. But I wanted to just kind of at least lay that out there, just partially even for me, because I keep saying things with like a 70% understanding of what I'm even talking about. So I wanted to kind of solidify, and I still don't fully have everything, but at least kind of lay it out, lay the foundation for what the heck I'm talking about. And then, all right, anywho, let's go through some of the combine participants and who's expected to kind of wow at the combine. So first and foremost, the thing everybody wants to know, who are the guys that could potentially challenge the 40-yard dash? Despite every year having the conversation, the very unfun conversation that the 40 doesn't correlate to success nearly as much as anybody wants to believe, and that teams couldn't care less about the 40-yard dash. It is the most fun event. It's what everybody enjoys, and I figure why not let people enjoy it? You know what I mean? It is fun. So I'll be a buzzkill for those that maybe don't know that that's a thing, but other than that, who cares? Let's have some fun with it. So to be clear, the 40-yard dash currently was broken most recently in 2024 by Xavier Worthy. He ran a 4.21 40-yard dash. Now, to be clear, I kind of thought that the question was interesting. How much faster can a person even get? I mean, at what point, because there is a max, there is a limit in terms of what human beings are physically capable of. And it feels like we must be getting close. It took a long time for anyone to get to 4.22, and then quite a bit longer for someone to get to 4.21. How much lower can we possibly get? This might seem not interesting to some people. I find it extremely interesting. So obviously we don't 100% know, but we can kind of deduce quite a bit based on what is physically, humanly, biomechanically possible. So let's start with the farthest end as far as like it's basically impossible this will ever happen, but this is kind of the end of what scientists believe is humanly possible. So, biomechanical models that estimate the absolute limit of human speed based on the maximum possible force a muscle fiber can produce suggests a 100-meter time of about 9.48 seconds. If you translate that perfect 100-meter run into a 40-yard split using football timing starting on the movement, the number lands around 398 to 4.02 seconds. And then it says, while a 399 might be theoretically possible for a genetically perfect sprinter under laboratory conditions, anything below 4.1 is currently considered the superhuman threshold. Now, to be clear, that gives us a lot of room to grow here. In fact, this kind of starts off with Usain Bolt, who at this point in time is considered the fastest human being that we've come in contact with. During his world record 9.58 second 100-meter dash in 2009, Usain Bolt's split for the first 40-yard dash was approximately a 4.22. However, track is different than football, where they start at the sound of the gun, which would include reaction time to the sound of the gun, whereas football is laser timed based on the start of your movements. And then in 2019, after he was long since retired, we're talking 10 years post his peak, he ran a 4.22 at a Super Bowl fan event while wearing casual sneakers and jumping off turf. So the thought is, if he had been in his prime, and if he had been trained specifically for the 40-yard dash, and if he was on a high-grip surface wearing actual sprinting shoes or cleats or whatever, he could have run, or it was believed to have run, a 4.1. So all that to say, because I keep thinking, like, we've got to be at about our max where nobody's going to beat this score. There's a little bit of room here. There's actually quite a bit of room here to get under the 4.2s. In fact, at some point, we probably will. It wasn't that long ago that, 4.2s were basically unheard of. Now it's becoming much more common. I don't think it'll be very long before we end up with a 4.19. How much further down into the 4.1s we go, I don't know. But remember, 4.1 is considered the superhuman threshold. So getting beyond that would be finding a person that is probably faster than what Usain Bolt was. Packer fan, by the way. So anyways, of the list of guys currently on the watch list of they may break it, and there could be others, but that I'm aware of. The first one that was brought to my attention, I don't know if I saved the clip here. Yeah, Mike Renner posted, Mississippi State's Brennan Thompson is the twitchiest mover in the wide receiver class. Big play waiting to happen. Will be a top 50 player on my board. I forgot to save who quote tweeted that, but somebody said he is in contention to break the 40-yard dash record. Now, if you watch the clip that he put up or any other clips, he's absolutely a very, very exciting guy. I mean, he's one of those guys that doesn't just run a fast 40, he just sails past human beings, which I freaking love. But he is believed to be the leading candidate to run one of the fastest 40s at the combine. To be clear, if his projection is probably closer to the 4.29 range, but he is on the watch list as far as who could possibly break the record if anybody was going to, or even come close to it. He's 5'9", 170 pounds. He ran a 10.22 second 100-meter dash in high school. Some reports put him at 10.18, reaching 23 miles per hour in college games. Earned a spot on Bruce Feldman's freak list, etc., etc. Another guy to keep an eye on. Blazing miles per hour GPS record, and that is Chris Hilton, the LSU wide receiver. The LSU GPS recorded him at 23.7 miles per hour. So Chris Hilton is another guy that is insanely fast. A couple other guys to watch, at least for fast 40s, that'll be fun. Whether or not they're actually going to break anything is a separate question. Desmond Claiborne, running back out of Wake Forest, hit 22.3 miles per hour. Very interesting return prospect as well. Nick Singleton, a Penn State running back, clocked in at 21.8 miles per hour on a touchdown run. Berrien Brown, LSU wide receiver, led the Senior Bowl in max speed at 20.87. And then some other guys expected to be in the 4.3s. Casey Concepcion, the wide receiver out of Texas A&M, and Zachariah Branch, the wide receiver out of Georgia. There could be several others, but these are guys kind of in the mid 4.3 range. In fact, I think all of them are expected to be 4.3s with the exception of Brennan Thompson, who's kind of in that 4.29-ish range. But there's always very surprising 40s, and so it'll be kind of an interesting group of guys to keep an eye on. Somebody else that might be kind of fun to watch is Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love is a real interesting prospect to begin with. He's a second-round running back, very successful, but was stuck behind an extraordinarily talented running back. But by himself has been probably undersold because of the fact that he was the number 2 running back. I mean, he is speed and power and the whole total package. He is a fun running back. Ran a 10.76 100-meter in high school. He cracked 22 miles per hour on the GPS in 2025. So he could end up falling into the 4.3 range, possibly, which I think would be pretty massive for him. Somebody else to keep an eye on, not that he's going to necessarily break any records, but just as far as, pound for pound, positionally, a guy that could really impress is David Bailey, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech. He apparently hit 22.16 miles per hour on GPS tracking, which is tough to do not only because you're 250 pounds as an edge rusher, but also because you generally are not doing 40-yard dashes on a football field. He probably was in this instance, but you don't have very many opportunities as opposed to receivers and running backs who are doing that all the time. Igbinosun out of Ohio State, as well as Andre Fuller out of Toledo, could be pretty fast prospects. And then another guy that's more positional than anything, but it's a big part of his game, is Talon Green, the quarterback out of Arkansas. One of the more athletic quarterbacks in the draft, but he's 6'6", 225. He's a big dude. So, the speed could translate quite a bit. Some other tests here, explosiveness tests, the vert and the broad jump. Sonny Styles, the linebacker out of Ohio State. Massive athletic freak. I mean, he's a Feldman freak list guy. 6'4", 243. He broad jumped 11 feet and topped 40 inches on the vertical already. If he's able to do that at the combine, he would end up with one of the highest relative athletic scores ever recorded for a linebacker. He is a safety converted to linebacker, so he's got a lot of fluidity and whatnot, so he's expected to absolutely dominate the combine. Bryce Lance, interestingly enough, who was just mentioned today or yesterday, Trey Lance's younger brother, another athletic freak, which is also why the Christian Watson comps, even though I don't think he's going to run as fast, but the Christian Watson comps are not super far off. He vert jumped 40 inches and broad jumped 10.10 in workouts. So remember, he's a big dude. I mean, he's seen as very MVS Christian Watson, like very tall and fast receiver. Again, probably not Christian Watson, but maybe MVS level speed. But, he's expected to be pretty impressive at the combine as well. Chris Hilton is a 3-time Louisiana State high jump champion. So his explosion numbers should be pretty through the roof. I don't know how much people care as much about that at wide receiver, but it's interesting enough. At tight end, John Michael Gillenborg out of Miami. Vert jumped 37 inches, squats 500 pounds, and was the fastest tight end at the Senior Bowl at 18.57 miles per hour. Then you got Jake Galday out of Cincinnati, sleeper candidate projected to finish top 3 among all linebackers in both the vert and broad jump. Bench press, the raw power. You got Caden Proctor, offensive tackle out of Alabama, probably the most physically imposing prospect of the entire combine, 6'7", 366, squats 815 pounds, and benched 535. Power cleans 405. Put him at the number 2 spot on Bruce Feldman's freak list. That guy's going to be fun to watch, man. 6'7", 366, and the guy is just an absolute monster. His max bench translates to a projected rep count that could approach 40 reps at 225. Perhaps most stunning, he also vert jumped 32 inches at that weight, a figure that surpassed 5 wide receivers at the 2025 Combine. Ridiculous. Dominique Orange, there's going to be a lot of big defensive tackles, man. These guys are going to just dominate the freaking bench. Verified 450-pound bench max projects to 35 to 40 reps at 225. Combined with his 34-inch vert at nose tackle, Orange is a rare athlete. Peter Woods, ranked number 5 on the freak list, benched 490 and squatted 700 pounds. Despite an uneven 2025 on the field, his testing numbers should be off the charts. Keldrick Falk, the edge rusher, apparently benches 415 and squats 700. He's 6'6", 285. He's an edge rusher. He is pretty big as an edge rusher, but still 285 compared to some of these, 320-pound dudes. He came in number 9 on Feldman's freak list. Doesn't turn 21 until September. There's also Gabe Akis, edge rusher out of Illinois, who's already been documented at 30-plus reps of 225 pounds, which is, again, pretty impressive for an edge rusher. The only non-defensive lineman, tight end Eli Raridon out of Notre Dame, benches 350, squats 535 at 6'6", 255. Looking at the agility drills, 3-cone, 20-yard shuttle, change of direction stuff. Couple guys to watch out for. Marlon Klein, tight end out of Michigan, seen as the agility king among tight ends. German-born prospect, made back-to-back appearances on Feldman's freak list and ran a 6.89 second 3-cone, faster than his former teammate Colston Loveland, who ran a 6.94. Ted Hurst, the wide receiver out of Georgia State, posted a 6.93 second 3-cone along a 10.8 broad jump and 20.33 max miles per hour at the Senior Bowl. Sonny Styles and Kyle Lewis at linebacker are the 2 linebackers most likely to dominate agility drills. Styles brings safety caliber lateral movement, as we already talked about. Lewis clocked a 21.34 miles per hour on the GPS and flew around at the Senior Bowl with sideline-to-sideline range. David Bailey projects to post historically fast agility times for an edge rusher. His explosive first step and 22.16 mile per hour top end speed at 250 suggests he won't just win the straight line dash, but excel in change of direction work. Among offensive linemen, Caleb Lomu, Mel Kiper specifically noted his agility and quickness that stand out most, and I think he's going to excel in the pre-draft testing and combine events. Francis Mauigoa registered a 1.57 second 10-yard split and 18 mile per hour max speed, both exceptional for a 335-pound lineman. And then some of the position-by-position looks. Taylon Green is the only quarterback expected to truly wow in the athletic testing. As far as the throwing, Fernando Mendoza, I don't believe, will be throwing at the combine, so we won't get to see that. So as far as guys that could impress throwing, I think Nussmeier is seen as sort of the top guy, really impressed at the Senior Bowl. Wide receivers, there's just so many of them. More than likely, you're going to see several guys stand out in some of these drills. But a couple guys to keep an eye on for breaking records that we've talked about. Caden Proctor on the bench. The current record is Justin Ernest, defensive tackle in 1999, did 51 reps. The highest since 2020 was Natane Muti, offensive guard in 2020, who did 44. So raw power hasn't really been as much of a thing. A lot of older prospects. We'll see if he can kind of crack into these top groups here. Jeff Caldwell could shatter the wide receiver broad jump record. His 11.9 mark exceeds the best 2025 wide receiver by 7 full inches. Zane Durant, if he runs a sub 4.740 at 280 to 290, would rank among the fastest defensive tackle times in combine history. Sonny Styles, as we said, could have one of the best RAS scores for a linebacker. David Bailey also could be in the elite category of 250-pound edge rushers in the 40-yard dash. Desmond Claiborne could be one of the fastest running back 40 times in years. And Logan Jones is a guy to watch for, one of the more athletic centers that we've seen in a very long time. So those are just some of the fun things to keep an eye on. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, maybe we'll do it tomorrow, we'll see, but I tried not to touch it too much. We got into it a little bit, but less about who could really dominate and more about who needs the combine the most. For some of these guys, it's not about can you get into the 4.3s or 4.2s. It's, we're drawing a line at 4.5. And if you're better than that, then you're a second-round pick. If you're worse than that, you're a fourth-round pick or something to that degree. But there's questions that the combine needs to actually answer, as opposed to we know David Bailey is a freak and he's going number 2 or something, and it just doesn't matter. We just want to see him run fast because it would be fun. You know what I mean? But anywho, I'm going to leave it at that. You all have a good rest of your day. I appreciate all the calls and texts and whatnot. Be sure to keep those coming. The phone number is 608-561-3243. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.